What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you my updated branded Despia profile. So, with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you do not miss out on any more upcoming content. At the end of the video, I will show you two interchangeable engines that I'm currently torn between about adding into the deck and which kind of strategy I want to take with this going forward. So we're just going to dive head first into the profile and show you exactly what we've got. So of course we are going with triple Fallen of Albaz. Pretty straightforward on this one now. I feel that 3 is perfect. Sometimes you can cut it to 2 if you really want to, but hard opening this is not the end of the world. It does become a bit of an issue if you don't have access to your branded opening or a route to branded Despia or Despia Luba. But the idea of just being able to normal summon a Albaz if you've already opened up Branded Fusion is so threatening to your opponent sometimes that it forces them to negate its effect. So if you don't mind discarding the cards that you have in your hand and you've got enough resource to burn through it and keep going, it can cause a lot of issues. Then for the other kind of Albaz-esque cards, we've got the one Quem, the one Cartesia, the one Albion, and I'm still playing the one Macoria. I think it's a really cool card. It's probably like the first one you go to off of the back of Branded Lost, in my opinion, but it's also like after you've gone through some of these, and the fact that Cartesia can come off the back of your Fusion Deployment, and then Quem is coming off of the back of your Nadir Servant, which we are playing in this version. It does work out really nicely, and then Quem being able to keep looping Cartesia is insane. Now onto the Despias, of course we are playing triple Aluba. Now this would probably change if you play one of the interchangeable engines that I'll show you at the end, which is the Chimera engine. Whether you want to play it 2 or not, the way I've kind of tailored the Chimera engine is I've done it as a supporting engine. So my main normal summon will of course still want to be Aluba, but then you do need to look at it that technically with your build, if you're playing triple branded opening, you've got 6 routes to get into your Aluba, whereas with the smaller Chimera engine, you've actually only got 4 ways to get into your Mirror Sword Knight unless you want to bump that up. So it's up to you how you want to mix with the ratios of those two, just to kind of see how it outcomes. I'm still playing the one Adlib and the one Tragedy. Personally, I still really like Adlib. I think it's such a good card that, you know, you only really want to be sending, searching Aluba off of the Tragedy if you've already, like, if you don't have access to this, or you haven't used your normal summon, which means you've already used Branded Fusion. So the next best thing that you're going to do when you normal summon Aluba and search is probably going to get your Branded Lost, Branded Red, or Branded Opening, which Branded Red can pretty much be searched or set through Alba from the extra deck anyway. So it really doesn't make much of a difference to be going for a second Aluba, in my opinion, which is why I do quite like still having the option to go for an Adlib, because then just being able to do a triple Mirror Jade is insane. So obviously you use your Mirror Jade's first effect, then you get rid of it, you bring it back with Cartesia, use the second effect, and then you can go Branded in red, use Adlib, Adlib can then bring it back, and then you've got your third Mirror Jade. And then when you're playing cards like, technically you could play Lulu Walif if you wanted to, you've got options of stuff like Titaniclad, you've got so many different kind of cards you don't mind sending to the graveyard that can then give you that little bit more of a push should you want it. I'm still on the Bestial engine. I think the Bestial engine is really kind of cool for the deck. One Lubellion, one Saranir. I am considering wanting to add in a Magnamu and a Druid Swarm. Saranir is really kind of cool for the deck, just at the base minimum of just sending a Retribution, banish a Retribution to bring back a Branded Fusion, Branded Red, you name it. Or, of course, if you do go through the combo of going with the Albion Dragon plus the Saranir, that can then give you a draw and give you another direct route to a search for Branded Fusion. If, for example, your opponent chooses to shotgun an Imperm on this without fearing, or even an Ash Blossom without fearing the Branded Fusion. Like, if I stop you getting to Branded Fusion, how can you do it? And it's like, right, okay, well, I've got Albion and Saranir that can help me complete that combo as well. And then, Return of the Mac. We are playing one Dark Magician in the main deck. So shout out to Charlie on this one. So Charlie actually used this against me and I was like, damn, people are using Dragoon again. And I was like, it makes sense because Dragoon is absolutely insane. There's another card in the extra deck that I've put back in here, and it's a card that I've missed for a long time. I really did enjoy it in the Branded strategy. So again, that's something that will interchange depending on local environment, and we'll show you that when we get to the extra deck. But yeah, Dark Magician, back in it. Yes, it is an annoying brick, but so is something like a Gimmick Puppet. But a Gimmick Puppet's more for the side deck, in my opinion, along with the Sanctifier Dragon. The main hand trap of the day is triple Ash Blossom. You can adapt this to Drolls if you want to. Again, in the interchangeable engine that I'll show you at the end, you're either going to play the Chimera engine, or because it takes up so much space, you're going to play like a Board Breaker hand trap engine instead. Then moving on to the spells, of course, triple Branded Fusion. not much more really needs to be said about that. Triple fusion deployment, like being able to activate this before you even attempt to use your fusion deployment, it's just another one of them threatening options for something of getting the Albaz out of the deck. Get the Albaz to the board, use Albaz's effect, and straight away your opponent's like, right, okay, cool, I need to either stop fusion deployment with a Baron, or my Baron's going to get contact fused off, or I need to negate the Albaz with the Baron, and then they still can activate Brand of Fusion if I don't have that Ash in hand. So the way you've got to look at it is fusion deployment and Albaz, both on their own, are like 1-for-1 trades. Technically 2-for-1, because you do need to have that discard. But if that discard is something that will get you a bit of an advantage, great. I am on the triple Nadir Servant. Again, this is a kind of option that you can take out if you want to. It's one of them ones where you're either going to try and protect from Ash, so you play stuff like Crossouts, you can play stuff like Thrusts that set you fusion duplication. There's loads of different options that you can play around with if you want to, but it's kind of one of them ones that I kind of said, right, okay, well, if you stop my Brand of Fusion, I've still got the option of Nadir Servant. Through Nadir Servant, I don't really need to do a huge amount. This is probably the only one that really does struggle against draw, because if they draw you early days, then of course you can't Nadir, but you'll still be able to send from the extra deck, which means at the very least you'll be able to set up a branded in red play for your next turn. Then of course we've got branded opening. Now the best thing about branded opening, and a massive tip for everyone on this one, is you always activate this during your draw phase or standby phase, because draw and lock bird needs to be activated during the main phase. So what that means is if you activate your branded opening as early as possible and you summon out your Aluba resolves in the standby phase or the draw phase whenever you activate it to then search you out your brand of fusion, meaning your opponent cannot draw you on resolution because it's not happening in the main phase, which means you technically get a search for free, which is really nice. Not to mention the graveyard protection effect that a lot of people forget about, but it's insanely important. And then of course 1 branded lost, 1 branded red, and 1 retribution. Again, all pretty straightforward and simple on this one. You don't really need to be playing more than that. The only one that you kind of, like, you would love to play more of it, but I think it becomes a bit of an issue if you are playing more branded lost, is the one itself. Now obviously the idea is that Lubellion can be sent to the graveyard with branded fusion, can bring itself back, bring you the branded lost. The issue is 9 times out of 10, unless you hard open this, or you already go through the Lubellion first before you activate the branded fusion, you're not really going to get the maximum value out of the back of this. It just causes a lot of issues. Like literally, and again, in a game against Charlie, I had Baron on the board. He activated Branded Fusion, Branded Lost, and I was like, right, I need to get rid of the Branded Lost, because as soon as he starts activating stuff like Branded Fusion and everything, if I don't have an Ash Blossom, I'm not going to be able to stop it. So like a Baron becomes useless and everything else from that point on. So it's such a powerful card, and you kind of want to play it more, but you don't need to play it more, kind of thing. So that's it for like the main deck. Like there's very few cards amongst this that I would actually want to change. It then comes down to like your play style and the way you want to take it. I already kind of talked about the Triple Tactics Thrust, Triple Tactics Talents and Duplication kind of esque bit. But the 2 options that I would say you could look for is, personally, I feel you could go for a very small Chimera engine. So you've got your Cornfields at 3, because this is the one that you can ditch to search. Now keep in mind this does play into Droll and Lockbird a lot more, because even if you activate Branded Opening, you get your Branded Fusion during the standby phase. As soon as you activate your Cornfield, this will then of course search you out your Mirror Knight. You get hit with Droll, you normal summon your Mirror Sword can then tag out, it can go for a Big Winged, and then you're not going to get any advantage of that because then your Big Winged can't search because you're under Droll. Of course, we're going with the 2 Gazelles and the 1 Chimera Fusion. So again, this is like a 7-card engine, and then it does take up 2 slots in the extra deck. You can make it take up 1 if you want to, but I quite like using this as a boss monster. Keep in mind when we do get the new Chimera Fusion, which comes out in Age of Overlord, which is due out in, technically, I think by the time this video comes out in like 3 days time for the pre-release, then you might want to add that into the strategy as well. You can play more Mirror Sword Knights if you want to. I've just tried to keep this at a base minimum. If you wanted to cut it down even further, you could cut 1 more Gazelle. But the idea of this one, like I said at the start, is that Aluba is my main normal summon. That's the one I want to go for more times than not. However, because that actually has a way to be special summoned consistently with the form of branded opening, you could flip the ratios and focus more on Mirror Sword Knight becoming your normal summon, and then only get into Aluba and utilizing Aluba off of the back of the branded opening. It gives you the options to play around with it if you want to, which is why this is something that I'm considering, because I do like the option of being able to hand rip for 1, have a bit of consistency, and the ability to constantly keep replacing my hand size. So I'm always with 5 when I'm using this engine, because it's got, okay, Kotal for Mirror Sword, so it just replaces itself. Sets up 2 Graveyard Negates as well, which is great. Mirror Sword, normal summon, I'm now down to 4 cards. Tribute off the Mirror Sword, bring out the Big Winged, still at 4 cards. Big Wing resolves, gives me the Gazelle and the Chimera Fusion. I now go up to 6 cards, so I've plussed a card. I activate Chimera Fusion, I fuse the Gazelle, I fuse the Big Winged, I go into the Chimera the King, and then at this point, of course, Gazelle will trigger, Big Wing can trigger, and you're going to add back the Chimera Fusion. So even though I've now gone down to 3 cards, I get it back up to 4 cards with Chimera Fusion. I balance my opponent's hand by knocking them down to 4 cards as well. So now we're on even playing fields, but I've got an additional monster on the board. I've searched out an additional card as well, so I now go back up to 5, and I've got the ability that's ripped one from my opponent's hand. So through those 5 cards, if any of those is a branded fusion, you then just get to run rampant, which is absolutely insane. Now the other alternative to this little engine here is just like a go second engine or more hand trap engine. So what I mean by that is the other engine I would consider is stuff like Super Poly, Book of Eclipses, Forbidden Droplets, and Infinite Impermanences, followed by 2 cards that will match the extra deck as well. So they kind of are like for like, is the form of your Super Poly targets with Garura and Mud Dragon, as they are the most generic. You can go for something like Starving Venom if you want to, but I feel that unless you know your local environment is going to be all darks or all of a direct dark attribute or the same of everything like that, these are going to be the best ones to deal with the rogue matchups and everything else in between. If your local environment does not care about Super Poly whatsoever, then again, you can change that out. You can go for 3 Eclipses, 3 Droplets, or 3 Imperms. You can heck even put in 2 Draw and Lock Birds, put in 3 Draw and Lock Birds. It's entirely up to you. What I'm trying to show here is that this is the extra space you have for the deck that you can utilize into other cards that you may wish to use. So that's it for the main deck. I'm now going to show you the extra deck, and I'm only going to show you 13 cards of the extra deck, because depending on which engine you choose, whether you go for the Super Poly one, or whether you go for the Chimera one, they are going to take up the remaining 2 slots. So moving on to the extra deck, pretty straightforward and simple on this one. Double Mirror Jade, followed by double Albion, and the 1 Lubellion. Like, to me, this is staple. Like, sometimes people might play 2 Lubellion if you want to. I don't think you need to even consider that now, because the only time they're going to rip your extra deck apart is if you've got Unicorn and you decide to Ash them. Even then, that's going to be a little bit rare. Or if you face up against the Dogmatika matchup, which would be a really, really fun like lore battle, is Dogmatikas versus the Branded, which would be really kind of cool, but you don't need to worry about that so much. I've gone back to the 1 Dust Dragon. This may become 2 at the moment. I'm not 100% sure yet. 1 Titaniclad, obviously Guardian Chimera. And then Quinteris, welcome back, alongside a Priscillian. I just really like these. I really like them as not only good Super Poly targets, but just generally pain in the backsides to deal with. Quinteris being able to reduce attacks is very, very powerful. Again, this is where you can come for a second Dust Dragon. You can come for different Super Poly targets. You've got flexibility to, you know, do as you wish. The 1 Rinbrum, I still like this, even if you're going to be using a Chimera engine, which you get a little bit more consistency for, because you can technically make this with Albaz and then Gazelle, and Gazelle does give you a nice little search, which is a nice little roundabout way. But then on top of this as well, just by sending this to the graveyard with a Mirror Jade, if you want to, gives you that ability to banish this from the graveyard, bring back an Albaz, and then you've got a quick effect during your opponent's turn to respondable Super Poly your opponent's monsters, which is kind of cool. And then the 2 returning cards, Masquerade Dragon, again, shout out to Charlie. There was just a time where it was like, we got to timing game 3, he made Masquerade. I was like, oh damn, they're still playing you. And he does put in a lot of work. But again, it's a flexible card, it comes down to your local environment. If you are sweeping your opponents apart so fast and you're not getting to time, you don't need to play this. If you're like, God, I'm constantly losing to time, what can I play? Well, don't forget about this bad boy. It's had 2 prints, 1 in Super, which was a Megatron reprint, and of course the original Ultra. And then the final card is Mac Daddy Dragoon. Pretty straightforward and simple on this one. Yes, it was great against Kashtyrus because they struggled to out it, but then this is just such a good boss monster that a lot of decks can now still struggle to out. So Unchained can struggle to deal with it sometimes as well. The fact that it needs to be targeted and it's like, yeah, you can't target me is really, really important. Obviously, there is a downside that as soon as your opponent does out a Dragoon, because you kind of put most resource behind it, it does become a bit of an issue. But there is a very nice option that you can go Branded Fusion, send Dark Magician, send Albaz, go into Lubellion, discard a card, spin back Albaz, and spin back the Dark Magician to make Dragoon. And then if you go Lubellion, ditch Lubellion, send off the extra deck Lubellion from the board to the graveyard, then of course you can set up your branded plays as well. Not to mention you do have other ways to try and push that little bit further forward to get into your Mirror Jades, to get into your Albions, to set up your branded reds. And this is all off of the back of Branded Fusion. So if you're going to choose to go with the Chimera route as well, you can technically end your board on a Dragoon, a Bestial Lubellion, a Branded Lost, plus you've searched off of the Branded Lost. You've then also ended up on the Chimera Fusion. You've got the 2 negates in the graveyard of your Mirror Sword and your Kotal. You've regained your Chimera Fusion as well, so you can make your Guardian Chimera during your opponent's turn. So it is a very, very powerful end board, and that's something that Dark Magician can actually produce quite nicely as well, if you do lock your Dark Magicians down to be in a fusion-based version of the deck as well. And you don't even need to worry about the Branded-esque element. You'd probably just make something like a Dark Magician Chimera build, which I really do like because it's very reminiscent of Yugioh's Battle City version as well, where he played the original Gazelles and Baphomets, which is awesome. But that is pretty much it for the list. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you, as absolutely always. I love Branded. It's one of my favourite decks around. I'm having so much fun with a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say underdog decks, but just a lot of decks that people have either felt have gone to the wayside, they're not that important anymore, they're all focused on Pearlies and Unchained. But I do feel that stuff like Red Dragon Archfiend, Scareclaws, Branded, they're definitely there still. They're definitely competitive, they're very, very powerful. And let's be honest, Branded looks beautiful with all of the high rarity cards, but, you know, painful a little bit as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.